Good evening. I'd like to start off by saying that I make these videos to entertain you and inform you of what's really happening during this crisis. The mainstream media is pumping fear into your minds to cause a worldwide pandemic. They are bombarding your TVs with misleading information for political and financial gain, but luckily you have people like me out there that can see through the lies and attempt to bring the truth to light. YouTube search Broke But Not Dumb and my name Hector to check out all my coronavirus theories. Some things I say might disturb you at first, but if you open your minds and start thinking outside the box, you'll discover that some of the ideas you've been fed your whole life are a lie. And I love this song. Today is April 9th. Happy belated birthday to my mother. And tonight's video is part 2 of the 4-part apocalypse series, how to make a coronavirus epidemic. Today we are going to talk about, how to make a COVID-19, how to cure COVID-19. We're going to talk about how China is to blame. We're going to talk about radiation when it comes to terms of mutations. And the explanation, we're going to explain the rise in coronavirus cases and deaths. And you're also going to learn a little bit about genes. So I like to start my videos with a summary of reality and current statistics that we are being fed. Coronavirus is real, and it's been around forever. COVID-19 is a novel strain of the coronavirus that was released in 2019 in Wuhan, China, so they say. Now, coronavirus tests are readily available now, but you must be exhibiting certain symptoms to get it. We know that you can have it, not get sick, and pass it to someone else. We know that indoors it can survive airborne up to 3 hours and up to 72 hours on the surfaces. We know that people of African descent are more susceptible to disease from the virus. We know that it can be passed from humans to animals and vice versa. But we finally solved the riddle of why there's an ongoing toilet paper crisis, even though the virus attacks the respiratory system. I bet some of you still don't even know, but before all of this, hysteria, the search word coronavirus, before it presented 1 billion of different articles, it actually spoke of symptoms that occurred in dogs with coronavirus. And guess what that symptom was? That's right, diarrhea. Look what happens when you believe the first thing you Google. We also know that if you're healthy, with a strong immune system, and under the age of 70, then the chance of coronavirus killing you is smaller than that of a fatal car crash. I am in no way saying that the virus can't kill you, and I sympathize with those that have lost someone during this time. I am an advocate of the community. I'm an advocate of community health and wellness and educated in the fields of immunology and pathology. I was put on this planet to break down walls and enlighten people. Only through knowledge and motivation can we save the human race from the F virus that is infecting us all. Fear is taking away our way of life, not the coronavirus. As a divided nation, it is easy for fear to take our power and freedoms away from us. United, we will beat this crisis. United, we will overcome our fears. And united, we can be not afraid. I'll get into the shirts at the end of the presentation. We're going to talk a little bit about natural selection and gene evolution. To understand how living things come to be, we have to understand some core genetic concepts. Humans are diploid organisms. Our DNA is a long chain of genes, each expressing physical characteristic it's coded for. At each gene location, there's an allele from your mother and an allele from your father. All living organisms contain alleles. DNA is when you have a deoxyribose sugar backbone, and every allele in each gene location is connected to another allele. DNA can be thought of as a ladder, and RNA can be thought of as a ladder cut in half vertically. RNA has a ribose sugar backbone with only one allele at each gene location. Now, natural selection. So we're going to talk natural selection. This occurs whenever genetically influenced variation among individuals affect their survival and reproduction. If a gene codes for a characteristic that results in fewer viable offspring in future generations, that gene is gradually eliminated. sickle cell anemia is a good example of gene mutation and survival. To put this in a nutshell, pretty much it just kind of means that the genes that are able to reproduce the most are going to be the ones that survive, and the ones that aren't able to reproduce, no matter what the cause is, whatever characteristics are impeding it, those genes will be selected against. So through natural selection, genes have evolved over time, and especially after a disaster, genes that code for a characteristic which increase reproduction and survival of that gene are selected for. A good example is the sickle cell anemia. Although deadly and harmful in most parts of the world where the gene for it is selected against, certain tribes in Africa, where modern medicine has yet to reach, the gene that codes for sickle cell anemia could be the difference of life or death. Without medicine, anyone that catches malaria has a good chance of dying. All except those with the gene that codes for sickle cell anemia, which prevents the virus from spreading quickly and gives the immune system a chance to beat it without medicine. So, although some cells seem to be relatively weak and seems like they should be selected against, you'd be surprised of what those defective genes could actually end up doing in different parts of the world. For example, survival, anything could really happen. So it's important to get a good understanding about genes before we talk about how to make the coronavirus. What are two things that can change characteristic expression? Well, that will be chance and mutation, and that can influence the outcome of each stage during reproduction. And sorry, I should have gotten some water. The head of the health department, Judith Pershaley, was scrutinized for her comments on TV by the Hungary riot causing fear manipulating media, but she was correct. She stated that the novel coronavirus will always be around and all of us will get it eventually. Why did she say this? Well, this mutated version of the coronavirus has the highest success of reproduction out of any virus we have ever encountered. The higher the rate of reproduction of a virus, the more contagious it is. Now, we're going to put ourselves in a scenario. The year is 2020, and huge medical advances have been made, especially when it comes to genetic engineering. I hope you guys could see that back there. I know it's a little small, but I feel like if I try to move it forward, the whole thing will fall down. All right. Well, anyways, you remember how we cloned Dolly the sheep? To make any identical duplicate organism, you need to retrieve its DNA and create copies using an organic medium. Well, it didn't take us too long to figure out that if we can clone animals from DNA, then we can manipulate DNA to create autoimmune disease-fighting drugs. Once we got the hang of that, then it became masters of genetic engineering. We became masters of genetic engineering by creating replacement genes to cure disease. Man. Really need a water. Sorry. A lot of cotton mouth. Anyways, where was I at? So yes, we can make drugs by DNA cloning and replacement genes to we can manipulate DNA to create autoimmune disease-fighting drugs. Once we got the hang of that, we became masters of genetic engineering by creating replacement genes to cure diseases. Have you ever heard of CCR5? This is a protein on the surface of white blood cells that is bound by HIV and is used to enter the HIV in the cells and open up a virus factory. All individuals of African descent have this protein, while people of non-African descent contain a common genetic mutant variant. Wild, right? People are saying that black people, African descent, whatever, are more susceptible. They're right. Because the genetic variant in non-African people confers to almost full resistance of the HIV virus. Now, by mimicking this variant, we are now able to provide the public with with the power to fight infection caused by HIV. Could this CCR5 receptor protein aid the coronavirus with infecting its host? And is that why people of African ethnicity are more susceptible to disease? With all this knowledge, is it impossible to ignore the possibility that the COVID-19 is a human experiment? Dr. Lee Wendian worked at the facility that leaked the virus and was silenced by authority when he discovered it was being spread. The then very healthy doctor dies before being able to fully explain his story. Interesting how the lab was indirectly receiving funding from a transgender charity group whose main contributor is George Soros. For you guys who haven't heard of George, I mention him in almost every one of my videos. Multi-billionaire George Soros is known for making his immense wealth through exploiting crisis, inciting riots, and silencing people that could expose him. Now, although, that's a little bit about George. Now, although we have no direct proof that China purposely engineered and released this virus for global domination, we can all at least agree that at a bare minimum, the virus was leaked from a Chinese lab, and China should be held responsible for infecting the world. But how did they do it? And why? And that is what we're going to figure out today. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about gene mutation using radiation. I'm going to get into a little bit about genes. We're going to talk about SARS. We're going to talk about bacteriophages and some 5G. Now, gene mutation, although it occurs in nature, can be manipulated through radiation. Every coronavirus strain that has every coronavirus strain has a crown. That's why it's called corona. A crown-shaped hooking protein that it uses to connect to its host cell. They all cause infection, but this one likes to hang out a little longer and it likes to fly around. So in order for this to occur, a mutation on a gene would have to code for a lighter but stronger protein sheath and a more effective hooking protein, or a stickier surface to latch onto. Bacteriophage, which include, if you've seen my other videos, if you have any questions about this, you can look on How the Coronavirus Works video. I don't have enough time to explain every single thing that I'm going to talk about that I've already talked about in other videos. So the bacteriophage, which encloses the virus and determines the virus's mobility, can be manipulated. By infecting different strains of bacteria with the coronavirus, you can replicate a large combination of different bacteriophages, right, which is the part that encloses the virus, each with its own capabilities. I'll give you an example. For example, Streptococcus bacteria is found to live for days on any given surface and take forever to fight and get rid of. Well, if the coronavirus succeeds in turning a streptococcus cell into a virus factory, the resulting bacteriophage would exhibit similar characteristics to its host cell super sticky cell wall. It's just a theory. I'm not saying this is what happened, but this could be a reason why the coronavirus lives on the surface for up to 72 hours and is hard to get rid of. Now we're going to talk a little bit about General Chen. And why I believe this is a man-made virus. So, General Chen is a general from China who invented and released the SARS virus in 2002. He was working in the same lab, actually, where the novel coronavirus was invented. Did you know that SARS stands for Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome and is caused by a coronavirus? COVID-02 to be exact, since they're named after the year they were founded. Don't you think it's strange that the same methods they used to contain SARS in China is being used on the entire world today? How hard is it to believe that China has been planning this outbreak for 20 years and practice it with a controlled release of another coronavirus, COVID-2, in 2003? How hard is it to believe that they had the virus manufactured and already spread it to most of the world before announcing its arrival? Coincidence that the COVID-19 gets released right after a U.S. trade deal between China and the U.S. that China wasn't fond of? How can we manipulate SARS to spread even faster, but maintain a low mortality rate so as not to completely destroy the world? For this, we need to dive deeper into nucleotide codes that make up SARS and the coronavirus. So first you need to know the 4 types of bases found in a DNA molecule. In coding we use the letters A for adenine, we use C for cytosine, we use G for guanine, and T for thymine. And in nature, an allele can be dominant, it can be recessive, or it can be a defective dominant allele through mutation, aka mutation. The dominant allele of the 2 alleles at a gene location will cause the cell to create a characteristic through protein expression that the dominant allele codes for. If both alleles are recessive, then the recessive gene will show. But if the dominant and recessive alleles get microwaved, it can inhibit the dominant gene's ability to provide adequate dominant protein, and the mutated recessive allele is chosen for in the gene expression. So what do we do next? Microradiation. The combinations are immense, but a basic idea would be if we radiated an adenine, we can make it exhibit thymine properties. Or if we radiated a guanine, we can make it exhibit cytosine properties. On to the next page here. We'll get a little further into radiation and also into coding. Let me grab something I wanted to show you. So, all right. What I have in my hand here is the entire sequence, the genome for the COVID-19, and the entire genome sequence for SARS, the COVID-2. And I did some comparisons. I read the code. It took me forever looking at this. What I found is that the SARS-CoV-2 contains 29,881 nucleotides, and the COVID-19 contains 29,821 nucleotides. So whatever caused the COVID to become stickier and become airborne and last longer and be floating in the air was the same thing that caused the deletion. My hypothesis is the same thing that caused the deletion in 60 nucleotides from the original SARS virus. Now, this is what codes look like. Very boring. And pretty much this is what a code looks like on paper. Okay? No joke. This is like font 8. Okay? This is how you read code. Now, these are all adenines, guanines, cytosines, and thymines. Only 4 letters, which all make up the codes. Now, the codes, if you look over here, the black, those are going to be the sugars. That's the ribose sugars, because when we're talking about virus, we're talking about RNAs. So instead of using deoxyribose sugars for the backbone, we use ribose sugars. And ribose sugars segment 3 parts of 3 nucleotides at a time using phosphates. So it has little segment groups. So this is what, so let's say we microwave something. Now we want to get the SARS to become the COVID-19. So if we add a little bit of microwave, we might be able to change the A to a thymine property over here and it could stick. We might be able to change the A to a G over here. But since we have less nucleotides here, what is probably occurring here is that one certain sequence is causing a deletion in another sequence. What I mean is one nucleotide from SARS that is found in SARS might be radiated and eliminated and cannot be found in COVID-19. Now, how do we, what do we got here? So, oh yeah, well, what did I find? So I found that in the last 2/3 of this code is very similar. So what does that mean? Since the last 2/3 of this code, that's right, that means I went through this many nucleotide codes. It took me forever, guys, for you guys, please, listen, pay attention. It took me forever. And what I found is that the last 2/3 of the nucleotide sequences for both the SARS-CoV-2 and COVID-19 are very similar, meaning they have, most of them are the same sequences with the deletion of some and minimal changing of other nucleotides, which could have been through radiation. What does this lead me to believe? So because the last 2/3 of the code is similar, it indicates that the replicase gene for this retrovirus and the crown hooking protein gene is located in the last 2/3 of the sequence. So we need to look into the first third to try to pinpoint differences on where the mutation could have taken place, because the first third of the sequence is where the genes that make the coronavirus as contagious as it is and also give it a low mortality rate are going to be located. That's right. The replicase gene causes it to replicate, but it also makes the nucleotides in the beginning kind of scrambled. All right, so I just took a couple examples here. Now, this is from gene location 601 and gene location 751 on the COVID-19, and just showed you kind of what they look like. I wanted to pinpoint them and kind of draw it out so that you have a little bit of an idea. We can't, to get really into the full genetics of it would take hours and days of videos for me to teach you guys that. Now, what would a cure for coronavirus be? Right? So before we get into this, I want to make it very clear, and I repeat myself once again, that those in good health do not need medicine to beat the coronavirus. I also feel that spending massive amounts of taxpayer money to get a vaccine for a retrovirus, which will mutate again, is a waste of time and money, and those efforts should instead go to public health awareness and sending families vitamin D3, which increases the immune system. So with that being said, the coronavirus is a retrovirus. Just like HIV and influenza, it changes its own RNA structure relatively frequently, thus confusing our immune system response to the virus when a novel form is exhibited. So essentially, a vaccine is an injection of a dead virus into your body, which causes the immune system to recognize the threat and create specific antibodies to target the virus. Now, since a retrovirus is always changing its RNA sequence, a new vaccine for the same virus would have to be made approximately every 6 months. You ever heard of the flu shot? That's the same thing. We're talking about the same thing here. Spend the money instead on sending every family in the world vitamin D3 and healthy living and eating guide for longevity and confidence, as this is what we are severely lacking in modern society today. Not a vaccine. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about the cure, the CCR5 protein, and we're going to talk about the ACE2 proteins. So the difference in the host cell protein receptor in comparison to HIV is pretty small. We have developed drugs to implement the genetic variant which remove the CCR5 protein from human cells, and this therefore creates a resistance to HIV. We know that the original SARS virus, aka the COVID-2, attached itself to the ACE2 cell surface receptor. Since the COVID-19 hooking proteins resemble the same structures and as its predecessor, we can use our knowledge about SARS to develop a genetic drug to cause a genetic variant which would delete the code responsible for building the ACE2 cell surface receptors on human cells. Thanks to CCR5, we can pinpoint the region in the human DNA sequence that codes for these cell receptor proteins and create a drug that resists coronavirus infections. Due to the nature of this retrovirus, which has a replicase gene, there can never be a real cure, but either through direct infection or human engineering, we can evolve our bodies to become resistant to it. This is the answer, not a vaccine. And we're going to talk about how could radiation happen in nature, because in the lab, it's really easy. You can do it with a microwave. You can do it with a tool. You can just radiate somebody with a gun nowadays, right? Well, we're going to talk about some 5G. So 5G, what is 5G? 5G is the new cell signal that has been set to roll out worldwide for a few years now. The problem was every time a city would roll out 5G, it didn't seem to work as planned. The current 4G signal was jamming it. There wasn't enough devices calling for it, and it failed. 5G has been fought over and has had a lot of restraint from people because it creates a new type of radiation that we've never experienced before on a global scale. The 5G radiation has caused radiation burns to technicians working on the towers, as well as almost 100% chance of developing some kind of cancer by working near the 5G towers. It's serious. It's not to be taken lightly. 5G can really cause a lot of harm. But in order for 5G to work, the world would have to reset itself to change its major networks and carriers to 5G. Although I don't believe that the worldwide shutdown is caused by the rollout of 5G, it's interesting how they decided to roll out 5G at the same time as the crisis, and therefore a very plausible but improbable theory came to be. Part of the 5G theory suggests that the effects of microradiation is what's causing us to get sick and not in fact the coronavirus, which is already found abundantly in nature. Although another alternate theory suggests that the radiation from the 5G towers is what's causing the coronavirus to mutate to its highly contagious COVID-19 strain. Although I'm a fan of that theory, I believe that if radiation in nature is in fact the culprit, then it would have come from the underwater nuclear testing by North Korea. In October 2019, North Korea successfully set off nuclear bombs underwater off the coast of China with China's consent. The coronavirus was discovered in Wuhan, China following that nuclear testing. Coincidence? A radiation of that caliber in combination with 5G cell signal would definitely be enough to increase the mutation rates in living organisms found in nature. Coronavirus is found in nature. So a combination of different radiations from different sources could actually cause this to do it in nature, but that is very, very low probability, and the probability of it being made in the lab is much higher. Because if the virus was caused in nature and not in a lab in China, then why are China's allies, Russia and North Korea, ramping up their military and speeding up their ballistic missile test launch? Isn't it interesting that Russia has only declared 79 deaths from coronavirus, yet it's almost the same size as the United States? How easy would it be for China to ask North Korea, Russia, and Pakistan to be allies in World War III against the US and the UK? Their economies and countries are almost already past the supposed epidemic, and they have already purchased most of the world on sale. Isn't it likely that the plan was for China to cause all the world's markets to plummet so that they could buy up every country's stock market, thereby controlling the world financially? With the resources in the USA and the UK depleted and the national banks going bankrupt, the most amount of national debt in history, how would our side be financially capable of supporting a war? With most of our constitutional rights already taken away from us because of the F virus, how hard is it to believe that the leftist-owned media was part of the world takeover in a desperate attempt to destroy the president for political and financial gain? In conclusion, we need to realize that although there are people dying from the coronavirus, it is far from being the cause of this global shutdown. As of today, the coronavirus global death toll at 92,191 just surpassed death of mothers during childbirth, but has still not surpassed death due to the common flu, which is ahead by over 40,000 deaths. Heart disease continues to be the leading cause of death in the world, and the coronavirus barely contributes to even 1% of the total world death toll. So why are the numbers growing through the roof? The number of cases are skyrocketing because a month ago, we only had a limited amount of tests available. Every test performed in the beginning came back positive because you needed to exhibit severe symptoms of the coronavirus in order to get tested. Remember what Judith said that I agree with 100%? Everyone will get the virus eventually. So if you roll out an extra 100,000 tests that can only be administered to people with the symptoms, they're all coming back positive. But when you make it easily available and instill fear into the minds of every human, then tell all those scared sheep to go get tested, you can spike the number of positive coronavirus cases. The downward spiral continues as the media announces a spike in cases to cause a further hysteria. Well, that explains the case number jump. But what about the death toll? Right here. A few weeks ago, the CDC mandated all hospitals to declare any patient that dies in a hospital during this pandemic as a victim of coronavirus, whether they are tested or not. The death toll that the elite few running this global setup was much lower than they had anticipated. And in fear of the people finding out that the coronavirus is not a real reason for global shutdown, they flexed their muscles on the CDC to create a mandate to spike the coronavirus death toll. This in turn again exploited by the media to strike fear and divide the nation. A divided nation is much easier to rule than a united one. I want to thank you for joining me tonight. I'd really like to upgrade my camera equipment so my viewers can enjoy a higher quality show, and therefore I am selling #NotAfraid shirts at $20 a shirt or $30 for two. Please follow me on YouTube, Broke Not Dumb, Hector Diaguiar, Instagram at Hector Diaguiar. And if you're interested in a shirt or you have any questions, we have every size, small, medium, large, extra large. You can email me at brokenotdumb@gmail.com. I want to thank you for joining me. Be safe out there. Don't be stupid. Be smart and be educated. Be not afraid. Have a good night.